Okay, hey, we're live here. I was trying to adjust my sound levels. Great to see everybody. Another episode of the John D. Villarreal Show, live show here. And I am so excited for this show. I am super excited for this show. We're talking recruiting. And I know that's really important right now. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about different sectors. I am joined by Jonathan Knight of iPharm. And Jonathan does a lot of things. I'm going to read this line right here. Is a life science recruiter with over 12 years of scientific recruitment expertise while leading world-class science-focused recruitment company and a team in life science. He comes to the show with broad knowledge of venture capital, private equity, research, manufacturing, and innovation centers across America. Now, American continent, really, that's even bigger. I also have to say this, a couple of things at the start here, some disclaimers. Everything I'm saying is all my personal opinion only, not alleging facts, not casting aspersions, all for entertainment purposes only, number one. Number two, not giving any advice. So everything you do is at your own risk in life. And number three, as I've said on my LinkedIn, I have been talking and probably will in the future talking to Jonathan about a position in the sort of VC life science space, and I'm sure we may do a lot of other things, and et cetera, et cetera. So I want to disclose that. Now, we've also done a poll, and there's some questions there. So we're going to take your questions. Jonathan, I'm sure, will have his expertise, but I'm just going to tee this up right away. And we had a conversation before, obviously, in relation to this other thing, and just a fascinating individual. I wanted, and just with a lot of expertise. And this is an area like, okay, let me set it up this way. I spent many years in Silicon Valley, and I was in a venture fund out there. I worked at Wilson Sonsini Rosati, at the time, and in my opinion, the number one law firm for high tech clients, high growth, EC, VC type of individual of clients, and consulting, and being a founder, all that type of stuff. The venture capital world is sort of divided into the two main pillars are IT and life sciences. And out there you have everything out there, Genentech and Amgen and all, Medtronics, all kinds of stuff. But and everybody knows very knowledgeable out there about IT. But life sciences is like its own thing, and you have a lot of PhDs and MDs, and you have Silicon Valley does a lot of that, and you have like certain pockets around the country. San Diego is one of them. Boston is another one. Polaris Ventures up in Boston. And obviously, I went to school at Johns Hopkins, and some people know that the backstory of me and my wife and everything like that. And one of the reasons I went to Hopkins is because of the super strength in healthcare and life sciences. And I was doing stuff with 1812 Ventures there, and it doesn't matter. But the point is having that expertise. It's not well known or discussed. And I know that a lot of people, I was thinking about Jonathan, I'm like, people are going to want to know about this. People are going to want to talk about this. Like, how do you get into that? Because now there's so many things happening with digital health and biotech and genetic engineering, and just so many things, stem cells, so many things happening that I really wanted to bring this world to the audience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and tee up Jonathan. I mean, tell me more about what you do, how you got into it, and what your typical day looks like.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. Very excited to be here and kind of share the message and, just to kind of talk and maybe help people, day in and day out in terms of their decisions. And I think, how I kind of got involved with this, like most recruiters, they don't really kind of think about it. We're kind of like a ragtag group of people who kind of grew up and came out of college and decided, all right, what do I do? How do I make money? And at the end of the day, basically recruiting is, at the end of the day, a group of individuals who just had to kind of focus in on a particular area, learn that area. And then the more that they became proficient at, communication and integration with clients and understanding strategy and how to make a fee, if you will, the more that they're around, right? They got years of experience. So I never intended to get here. It's an interesting story. I mean, I could probably bring you back to, when I was 14, 15, and my dad was a pastor for 20 some years. We barely had any money. And at some point, it was kind of like my dad left the church and decided I'm going to become a recruiter. And he did that for a few years. Wow. I started to go on vacations. We started to go.
Life's a little different. Yeah.
So I remember growing up and thinking that's something I want to do. I want to be able to make money and then use that money to make an impact in the world. And, growing up, I just kind of got to the state of life where I was just like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. I was going to the Marine Corps. I made an agreement, kind of did all the ASVABs and everything to go to OCS or officer candidate school as you graduate out of college. And some guy came to me and said, I got a deal for you. I can
Thank
make
you for your service, by the
figure.
way. That's Marine Corps. That's impressive.
I never served, just to be very clear. My intention was to go to OCS, get through college, and become a lieutenant in the Marine Corps. Because that's just my mentality. I'm like, it's kind of like hardcore kind of guy in everything I do. But subsequently, by trying to do that, and somebody was like, listen, you can make $43,000 and potentially go to war, or you can make six figures in 2-3 years. At the point, I had a girlfriend, and I was just like, all right, like I'll make a life instead of it. I've learned what I could,
Yes.
Just through videos and stuff. Luckily, the internet was around, so I kind of grew up in this area, and then subsequently, I sit here now, almost 12 years of doing recruitment, engaging with clients, and engaging with candidates each and every day. I kind of sit here and say, man, it's ever evolving, and it's an exciting field to be in. And when it comes to venture capital, just to kind of touch base on that, I mean, it's a discourse that's very close knit. It's who you know. It's not what you know.
Yes.
A lot of this stuff is you don't hear about job opportunities.
No.
The job opportunities you heard about were post-event, right? Like, hey, I just got this opportunity at Venture, Atlas or whatever group it is.
Yes.
And subsequently, you didn't even know it was on the table, but it's because they happen to know, Jim knew Kathy, and Kathy was the right candidate for that role. And so it's not necessarily as a talked about discourse on how to get into it. But I think today, hopefully we can demystify a little bit of that. And I would say at the end of the day, it really comes down to those connections. It comes down to what you know.
Let me just say, there's no question. It's funny because, like, I was looking at some different things, and I've had some people look at my resume and say, wow, this is like Goldman Sachs, or why do you want to do this? Why don't you go back into venture capital? I mean, I'm like, because you don't just go back to venture capital. Like, it doesn't work like that. I mean, and the job search is like this. It's not like this,
Mm-hmm.
I said, now, and I explained this to someone in a little more detail. I'm like, look, when I started to get into it back in the day, you either had to be, I mean, it's more expansive than this, but you either had to have been or are a superstar. Like, you built this company, took it public, everybody knows who you are, or you're coming out of, superstar lawyer, superstar banker, just with crazy Rolodex with connections, right? I mean, a superstar entrepreneur might be able to get something on their own because they have that name. They've taken a fund, and usually it was the fund that funded you. You took that deal public, they got money, then you get back in, or you're superstar lawyer, superstar banker, etc., and you have other connections and people like, okay, well, maybe we'll try this, or you raise the money yourself, right? I mean, anyone could be a venture capitalist if they can raise the money themselves, or, and again, we're not giving any advice. Everything you do is at your own risk, etc. Or you were the daughter of, the son of, the brother of, or the college buddy of, roommate, that kind of thing. You had that super connection. So either superstar, super connection, or you raise the money yourself. There really wasn't like, hey, if you go to Berkeley, you go to Stanford, although. Small caveat there. A lot of VC people came out of Stanford MBA. That just is the right thing. And I almost, coulda, shoulda, woulda went there. And a couple of times before I got my MBA, I almost did it. But the people were like, "Well, why do you need to do that, John? Everybody knows who you are, and you're making tons of money, and you'll start back here." And I thought I had a good shot at. And this is my opinion. I'm not alleging anything. I thought I had a good shot at Wharton. I thought I had a good shot at Stanford and obviously Berkeley for different reasons. But we'll get into that another time. So I don't want to waste any time on this. And I probably talked about that before. But anyway, but then I didn't. And then I moved out of the Valley, and it was like, yeah, I'm in Florida. Yeah, nobody knows you. and this is back. This isn't Florida now. This was back in 2014 or something. And there is no tech anything over here, and there is no venture. And of course, there's some, but it wasn't like now. There's actually stuff.
Right.
But there really wasn't a farm team in terms of if you go to an M7, if you go to a top 10 MBA program, then you get a job as an analyst or an associate, like the bench or the farm league of big consulting or iBanking, stuff like that. Today, with the proliferation of venture and corporate funds and things like that, there is more of that. You do see where there are these paths, but even then, it's not nearly as clear as the other things. And you're probably more of an expert on this. Like you might be, okay, maybe you'll be an analyst. Okay, maybe you'll be an associate. Okay, maybe you're working for corporate VC. One of my very good friends was a corporate VC, and I've got a lot of different contacts. We both do. And yeah, it's great if you want to make a salary, but it's not like you're VC, that you're going to go from this level. Now you're a partner. Now you're making big carry. Now you're making, it's different. It's a job, and it's fine. So, but it is a new world, and that's a longer setup because I think that's important. And I'm going to turn it right over to you. What is it like now? If I want to get one of the top, it wasn't like we have tons of, but the top polling question was, how do I get into VC? How do I get into PE? We'll say that. Let's start with that generally, and then we'll focus on life science because that's its own thing.
Right. I don't know how much I can speak on how much it's changed. I've been in the discourse long enough to see nuance changes, in terms of just, clients being more open, more available to certain types of candidates. But at the end of the day, it still kind of comes back down to this element of relationships, right? They happen to rely on me. I happen to have relationships in my network, and subsequently you just kind of put the pieces together. Now, how somebody joins into the private equity, the venture capital discourses, I think, again, at the end of the day, is going to go back to this space of making connections, having dialogue, not being afraid to, kind of reach out to somebody who is the CEO of a big company and say, hey, here's my background, or, let's set the foundation of kind of what I'm trying to do. And if there's an opportunity in the future, then, let's kind of cross paths when the time is right. I've had very smart people who come to my desk and are looking for advice and have MBAs and, doctorate degrees. And they're like, how do I do this? Right. And you think, man, you're like a doctor. You're super smart. Like, right. It can't be that difficult or have to get into. But at the end of the day, if you really look at it, you realize that there's very little visibility to the route at which you can get into those doors. And so, I think they kind of come back to it. It comes to this space of, what is your passion? What is your expertise? What are the risks that you're willing to take? Because similarly, a venture capital company, in order to hire you, is going to have a certain element of risk versus reward.
No doubt.
And
I'll talk about that when you're done. I'll lay some stuff out. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the model in terms of how they approach business, right? And then at the same rate, they're going to approach anybody who is coming to their front door and saying, hey, I want to work with you. Well, what do you bring into the business, and what is that risk to me? What's the learning curve for you to understand what we're doing and how we do it? Now, again, I mean, these big, prominent venture capital companies, I have a hard time finding anyone more than 50 people, 60 people. I mean, it's a small group. We're not talking about global pharma, 150,000, 300,000 employees. So when you're talking about the top of the top, and the top of the top is 50 people at one company of 10 or 7, you're really kind of talking about your odds of one person amongst 300 people out of the entire population. And how do you find those people? Well, I guess at the end of the day, to me, if I was a recruiter, I was being asked to find people, which is what I do, right? I want to understand the market. I want to understand where everybody is, and I want to categorize them and give visibility to these folks. And again, starting a dialogue that will ultimately create relationships that are then become not just connections, but friends. That is kind of the route at which I can foresee that being the pathway to getting into that discourse. But you got to map it out. You got to kind of utilize the resources that you have, free resources like LinkedIn, or you have the access to something LinkedIn, like Zoom Info that gives you kind of the corporate structure. All of these different, platforms are really going to give you the opportunity to map out your journey and who you have to connect with. And again, from my perspective, finding people and finding conversations comes in threes. You got to find the decision makers, the influencers, and then of course those who are kind of reactive to the needs. So if you can influence the influencers and get the decision makers to say, hey, this is somebody I want, then the proactive or the reactive people from an operational standpoint are going to be like, yeah, sure, I'll set up the interview, I'll set up the calendars, whatever. But you got to have familiarity, amongst all of those folks. So, I would say that's my shortest answer there.
No. That's fantastic, and that's awesome. And I just wanted to, I wanted to let you roll there, but as you were getting into it, I'm like, I think I know how I want to set this up, and I want to say it this way. So, to drill down more, just so the audience understands, corporate venture capital is, well, first of all, I'll absolutely support exactly what you said. These organizations are very, very thin. So there's a lot of funds out there where it's one person, 2, 3, 5, 10. That's it. I mean, like you said, the biggest, the mega funds, 10, 50, right? And so what that says is there's nowhere to hide, right? And the level of trust and the skills that it takes is super high. And I'll get to that in a second. I'll come back to that. So if you wanted to sort of, if I were starting out, if I were to talk to people, again, not giving advice, but if I were for myself starting out and I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't have the background, I didn't have the level of confidence, I wasn't sure, like I was interested in this space, I would probably try to start at corporate VC. Like I did a lot with, I'm not saying I did, but I mean, I had some familiarity with like Intel Capital, and I know like Cisco had, they all have Google, they all have, a bunch of these big corporations have their own VC funds. And as much as it's, in that, you have much more organization around you. You have a lot of other people that even outside of the internal fund, you can leverage product managers, expertise, senior management, where you can get some guideposts. Also, with corporate VC, yes, you're looking for a return, but oftentimes the goal there is strategic. Like, hey, it's a way to outsource R&D. Or, if this thing, like you see it all the time in the video game space, right? Where you have EA that was doing a lot of acquisitions and stuff. It's like, hey, okay, we'll buy Maxis, and hey, we'll buy PopCap Games, and blah, 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 and if I'm recalling correctly, in my opinion. So it's a way to, you don't have to get, if something is good R&D or is good strategically, it doesn't have to be 100x. Kind of return. It just has to sort of strategically work. And this is a way where you can kind of learn about deals. Now, but that's again, probably more the world where you're going to get like a salary and it's more of a normal job type of deal. In the world where people think about the big VCs or making the big money and the big bets, let's say, let's call it private VCs for lack of a better word. I mean, that's not really, but anyway, the Sequoias, the Kleiners, the Excels, the A16Z, all that type of stuff. Now you're talking about those partners. I'm not alleging anything, but I'm just, venture fund X private. That's where you might get 20%, 30%, 40%. Let's just call it 20% of the carry, such that yes, you'll get a salary and yeah, you have management fees and whatever, but the more money you raise, the more potential upside you have. But really the real money that you're going to make is if you make the right investment, work with that company, and that company at some point gets an exit at a 10x, 30x, 100x, 1000x in some of the like some of the early benchmark funds, if I remember correctly. That's where you get the massive money, right? If you have a portion of that carry, meaning the portion of the upside when and if that exit happens. Okay, now, and again, not giving anybody any advice whatsoever. Now, in that environment of the private VCs where it's very, really small, thin organizations, if you and I are in a fund and you say, hey, John, I'll give you a chance here, and you're the managing, general partner, whatever, or the founding partner, you've got to believe that I know how to source deals. I know how to get in at the right valuation. I know how to, when everyone's competing for their deal, because the hot deals everybody wants in, right? And can I secure that deal? Do I have the right relationships? Can I add value to that deal? Do I then have relationships with the bankers and the lawyers and to be able to and recruiters to be able to staff that team up? Can I work these deals? I need to know about 5, 10, 15 different things really well, right? At least like minimum 3 really well to be able to do my job and be able to execute well for the fund, along with sitting on 20 or 30 board meetings and maybe helping raising money for the fund and doing all the other things. And that's a big deal. So it's like, it's not like someone else can do my job or I get to pull someone else in. Sometimes you'll have multiple partners, but usually it's like, I have my deals and you have your deals. So yeah, it is massive amounts of trust. It's almost like if we were using, I don't think people fully understand. Go ahead. I don't think people fully understand that. So I wanted to lay that out as to why there is that high bar to get in.
Right. No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're at that level where you're autonomous and you're engaging with the deal and with the partners of the deal directly and looking for specifically or responsible for that outcome, of course, there's not only just a tremendous amount, but there's a planet-sized amount of responsibility on your shoulders, right? There are people who are relying on feeding their kids and so on based on your interactions. But, kind of touch base, and if you don't mind me interrupting,
go ahead, please.
On this, you mentioned something before, which is, these areas of academics where you can learn, right? These Stanfords, right? And you can get into these entrepreneurial courses, Johns Hopkins universities,
yep.
Where they have these entrepreneurial discourses where you can kind of understand the basics. At the end of the day, it's stuff that you probably already knew. It put terms to it. It put them in sequential order so you could understand it. And then subsequently, when you look at life sciences, you look at the big companies, the GSKs, the BMSs, the Pfizers, they have these search and evaluation teams that you can get involved with, being paid on somebody else's dollar, base salary, whatever. And what you'll learn is, this is what makes a good therapeutic to buy. This is a good valuation. This is what the big companies are interested in. And at the end of the day, that is part of that macro set of skills that makes the deal come to life. Because if your goal is to purchase into a therapeutic, develop it to a certain state so that a Pfizer would want to buy it from you at a 10x rate or whatever, then you got to know what they want, right? You got to know preemptively that that's something. So if we're talking about avenues and approaches to get into VC academically, and then experientially, there are steps that will step you up into the place at which, hey, I have enough trust. You went to the Stanford. You did a few deals at a search and evaluation type role, and subsequently, here's what your deal sheet looks like, and we can trust in that. Let me just teach you how we do it over here at this business, And I think that's where you can get in, but I don't think you step in the door and then make deals like that.
No,
it's just kind of two different things at that point.
And I'll elaborate a little bit more on this because I think I want to really lay the foundation out here, and I want to drill down more as well, specifically in life science. So, part of that trust factor is you can raise a fund, and that's just step one. Okay, now you have your fund. Guess what? If that fund isn't successful, there may not be fund two. Okay. And these funds have roughly usually about 10-year life cycles, which is very interesting for the life science space, where sometimes it takes 10 years to bring a therapeutic or new pharmaceutical to the marketplace with all the regulatory issues and just development times and phase 1, phase 2 and all that goes into it. We'll talk about that in a second. And so part of it is, there's some VCs out there that are extremely good, that are very general, like, hey, we'll look at it basically a wide range of areas because we think that we're really, really great and we've done these things, and we'll have partners that focus on different things. And there's a lot of funds that are very, very narrow. And I talked to someone at a venture fund the other day that is super narrow. And part of that is, hey, we know what we know. This is what we do, and it's how to mitigate that risk. How can you get the upside, the right deals, and the connections and relationships, and how do you mitigate that risk? And so that's very interesting. Now, turning to life science let's talk about that, because that is something that oftentimes you're going to see where you have lots of PhDs and MDs along with the MBAs that are in the mix. Tell me a little bit more about, but you also have I'll pause, I'll come right back. So because of those sector focus, you have, and I don't want to get too, but I'll just super high level talk about this. You have interesting things happening where people are like, hey, I have a different theory about a fund, or maybe, these deals or people that don't go to Harvard and Stanford and Berkeley or MIT aren't getting as many opportunities in the Valley or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not alleging anything. I'm just saying hypothetically, right? And so those are the schools that have, if you look at who's been funded, then those schools are pretty well represented. And so you have people who have gone out there and have done their own funds now because we have a different theory, or we want to try to open things up in the venture capital scene, which is really cool. But again, it still comes back to, you can raise all the money in the world, but you still have to have a successful fund and make successful investments. And I think that it's a very exciting time where the doors are definitely open, and I'm all about equal opportunity and freedom, liberty, and equality for everybody, obviously. But you still, there's no but, that's okay. Separately, venture capital, yeah, okay, live show. Separately, the job of venture capital and building great companies is very, very challenging and takes a massive amount of range of skill sets. Let's talk about that skill set and what's different in life sciences. Lay that out, because I think that's very unique. A lot of people may not understand that.
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, you have to understand that my position and kind of what I do is work with scientists and clinicians all day long. So yes. To me, the ethos around my world of people like bachelors and nurses and all of this, I just don't experience it. So when I was younger, I thought of doctors as a small group. I now said, and I just think like that's my entire world right now. Now, so that being said, these types of degrees, there's a certain element here where you had an intention to do patient care, or you had an intention to invent something that could be a compound that could save, millions of people's lives, right? Or any of that. Now, I think where I stand in this is, I see a lot of people, well, not where I stand, but more or less my perspective. I see a lot of people who have PhDs and MDs, and they have great ideas. And there are, at great institutions, banks that are dedicated to working with these institutions to give them some sort of money so that they can start smaller businesses, right? And then from that standpoint, once you start a business and you know that your therapeutic is a good therapeutic, it could potentially help, mass amounts of people. You have to kind of go through the motions and test it, right? You can't just come up with a theory and say, well, the proof of mechanism works, so it's going to be great, and we can make, billions of dollars on this. You got to go through the steps, and that's where 90% of people or therapeutics fall out. Now, at the end of the day, basically, when you look at, okay, I have an idea, I've got some money, and I start a business, well, then that's really the foundation to getting into venture capital companies. Where when I first started and working in this space, I thought that you climb the ladder to become the CSO of Pfizer, and then you get dragged into, venture capital companies. Although that can happen, right. It's not the normal. The normal is, hey, I got some money, I got a great idea, I'm a PhD, and the business our trials and everything seem to be going well. A company comes over and says, we'll invest all this money, we'll take the majority share, et cetera, and help divide and help you do some corporate development. You build your team around you. And once you're in that company, you're getting once the company is invested into you, then from that standpoint, you can then take that opportunity and either develop it and get it to become a product and you make your equity and all your money, or you develop it to a certain state that a company wants to buy it and you sell it off, you make your money, and then you've got some cash, right? And you can develop a fund from that standpoint.
Yes.
So, these are the foundational steps from when we're talking about what are the technical expertises. If you're an MD and all you've done for several years is identify good therapeutics for a company, you could come in, and a new model that's happening these days are consultants that go to these companies and say, hey, I found this particular asset or therapeutic, it's worth this, we could buy it at X dollars. And quite literally, you could probably share that to every venture capital company that is in life sciences. And maybe the ones that are more broad or the ones that are specific in that area might kind of pick up on it. Again, giving you an opportunity to make equity and cash where you can make your own fund. And I didn't realize how simple it was, because once you have cash, then you have opportunity to do, right? So
And that's a good point. Like entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, that's a good point. That's another way to get things going. They become their own angels, or they collaborate with some other entrepreneurs, maybe from the same company, and they have their own angel fund. And as that does well, or as they start getting activity out there, then they can get other investment together and build a fund from that. So that is an excellent point. That's exactly right.
Right. So I think at the end of the day, basically, when you look at, how you can get into life science, or not into life science, but venture capital companies that are focused in life sciences, I think you've got to be in life sciences in the first place, right?
Yeah.
You got to have this intention. All right, from the beginning, I did an entrepreneurial program, but I also learned molecular biology back in, as my bachelor's. So these few things are elements of my passions, and I'm going to combine them. But what's the long-term goal? What's the thing that ties me into the future? And if that long-term goal is I want to make money, I want to make an impact, I want to bring things to the market that have never been seen before, how do you do that? Do you do that through the corporate ladder and the structure and play your part? Or do you decide, I'm going to take some risk? And I think this is just like everybody's life. We face this all the time. It's like, do I still work for Amazon, or do I decide I'm going to go and do my own thing for Uber or whatever company, or just yourself, start your own, business. So at some point, the analysis of risk versus where your life is and where you want it to go, you're going to have to make that jump. But the real question is, do you have the foundational knowledge? Are you in a place where you can leverage that? And what is the long-term risk? Well, short-term and long-term risk to both yourself or getting involved to that company. What is that company going to view you as? Because all we do is really view risk, right? When we look at candidates, we see, okay, this candidate's a good candidate, but what are the red flags? They're not going to move. They're not going to, whatever. So you kind of have to be very aware of those red flags before you even step out of the door in the first place, is my opinion.
I probably have a lot of red flags, but I got a massive upside. That's a little self-serving there.
The balance, right?
You got to balance it out, right? I mean, but you look overall score. But I would say this. And I'm just having some fun, of course, and trying to be entertaining. And I appreciate Jonathan playing around with that. I think that, but exactly right. Everybody has their upsides and their different risks. I would say that's an interesting thing, right, that you said there, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of this, if you were to do law, right, and you go out there, I mean, you're talking 4 years of under. I mean, there's, and I'm not going to get into, but the general pathway is basically 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of law school, pass the bar, get a job. Okay, now you're out there doing what you're doing, from what I understand, my opinion. And again, not giving advice. But with medicine, right, or when some of these big, biotech things, you're talking about an MD. So, but then you have to get your residency. So you're 4 years of medical school, then 3 to 5 years, if I'm right, of residency. You may also want to do an MPH, Master in Public Health, or a PhD. So you're talking like this massive investment in just, oh my God, and fellowship. Yeah. So you're talking this massive investment of time and expense in education. And then are you going to go for the clinician job or the safe corporate job, or are you going to pivot into this high risk world of startups and venture capital and stuff like that? And I think that's a tough pivot right?
Well, perspective, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to perspective, right? So I've said this before, I say it many, many, many times is, the example of clinicians, right? 4 years of pre-med, 2 years of residency, another 4 years of a fellowship, and then you're entry level. Right? At that point, you just start. And then from that standpoint, the investment in cost and all of that. But to kind of get back to it, I think where, you have a certain level of expertise, but your perspective was to do patient care because you were going through as a clinician. You were trained to do. Yeah,
that was your love, right? That's right.
So the perspective is really important because when you think about, okay, well, how do I want to make my impact? Is it on a macro scale? Is it let's just get it to 10,000 and see if, a few thousand are better than not? Or I really like that one-to-one. I can understand their family life and what they're doing and, what they're eating, so I can understand their,
those are the exact conversations I have with my wife. It's like, yes, I know you want to be a clinician, everything like that, and that's great. I'm not deterring you from that. But if you want to impact like the healthcare system or the world of health or something. There's all kinds of stuff you can do out there. And now I will say this, and I'll zip it again. What's very interesting and unique now, I think, is that you're seeing opportunities in regenerative medicine, all the stuff in genetics, but also with digital health. There's ways you can play the healthcare life science space with digital and things and telemedicine, without going through all the FDA approvals and stuff like that, so that maybe you can, it does look a little bit more like the 3 to 5 year, startup unicorn life cycle, as opposed to the 10, 15 years all or nothing traditional biotech health, pharma type of timeline. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, delivery systems and devices, right? I mean, you could get it. Yeah. Computational methods and then that approach of how that helps support clients or big venture capital companies look at it, thousands and thousands of assets and say, yeah, I think we could probably look at maybe only these 50 or so, and then we save ourselves some time. There's elements, just like you mentioned, right? I think that you can get in multiple routes, and it just depends on that market map, right? So if you're a device person, there are companies who are venture capitalists that focus only on the device side, the delivery methods. There's people who only focus on therapeutics or computational methods and how to create these algorithms so they can sell it to businesses, and those businesses can look at their, there's multiple avenues, but I would say at the end of the day, you got to have that experience. You got to be there, you got to have that intent. And if the question is, how do I get into it? It means that you're not into it. Like You're not in that discourse already. So if that's the predominant question, then I'm going to focus on this idea of you got to kind of map your journey. And of course, there's going to be routes that will kind of go left or right at different times. But for the most part, you map your journey, you know where you're headed, you know what your passion is. And when you know your brand and where you're going, it's easier to sell yourself. It's easier to talk about, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do. All I need is a platform. And again, you only gain more power. Let's say somebody did that from just straight out of college. I know what I want to do. I know where I'm going. Well, you only gain more power to your pitch and your journey when you add Johns Hopkins or Stanford behind it, or then you add an SNE or search and evaluation role in the meantime, or somewhere in there. So I don't think that it has to be the thing that you step out of college to do. I think that that has to be venture capital, and going in that route has to be something that is part of the journey or is the end goal of the journey, right? You have to build yourself up to get to that state. Once you do that, or you're an expert and you've done those things in the industry, in life sciences, in healthcare institutions and academia, you build up your reputation for good science. You could come in and do SNE. We could trust that you know what a good therapeutic looks like and what will make it to the clinic or not. So, you just have to evaluate yourself. And at the end of the day, there's people like myself that can go out there and just, make a quick look and have a discussion and say, I think this could be helpful for you, or you might want to go this route. But at the end of the day, I think it's easier than people make it. It's just not so visible for people to really kind of see, how do I do that? How do I make
no doubt. And I want to talk more about your typical day. I definitely want to be mindful of teeing up these questions. And you probably got questions. I appreciate you posted on your LinkedIn. So you may have some questions on your end. We've got a question here from Ilian Yanakiev. I hope I pronounced that right, Ilian. What are recruiters looking for?
What are recruiters looking for? I'm going to go back to it. Red flags, massive red flags for people. No, I mean, that is an element, but I think at the end of the day, what recruiters look for, is going to vary. I would say what recruiters are really looking for in the context of, alignment to their job, alignment to what the clients are looking for, your personal interests and whether or not there's flexibilities around that. But I think at the end of the day, what you really want somebody to do, if you're going to work with them, is you're going to want limited red flags. You're going to want transparency and honesty throughout the entire process, a collaborative work environment where you both are kind of discussing not just one opportunity, but multiple opportunities, or you're collaborating on what was the feedback, how did you feel, how does this affect your spouse or your kids, To be vulnerable, I guess, is a really good term that I would like to use, because when I'm honest and I'm vulnerable, I'm giving the best.
Authentic, transparent.
exactly. I think a lot of people try to play games, right? And that creates a certain level of just unknown factors in the world of recruitment anyways. Like, can I play the compensation game? Can I play the work from home game? Or can I play the, I'm reaching for the stars, but I can do it game? If you avoid, I don't want to say, because reaching for the stars is a great thing. Like, I that's what I do, right? But I think in a lot of ways, you want to kind of have your understanding of self and its value across the market. And the only way you'll know that is by talking to somebody like myself or other recruiters, right? So once you understand yourself and your value within the market, then your position of where you're going and what your goals are, I think, are ultimately going to line up much easier. But if you think you're here, I'm just a scientist, and I just finished my postdoc, but I don't really know, should I go into another postdoctoral fellowship, or should I join as a scientist? Or you have all these questions. It makes the job search hard. It makes recruiters not really, if they're not intelligent about the market with 12 years of industry experience in one particular area, which most recruiters are not. They're, 2 years here, 3 years there in computer science, in life sciences, and then somewhere else. If you could find somebody who really knows the market and will be able to, consult you through kind of your journey and help put all your ducks in a row, I think if you're vulnerable and you're honest, those things will come much more aligned, and then the opportunities will come, quite quickly. So
can I do this? And I don't want to put you on the spot, and it's totally cool. And I don't, I respect everything, because I love what you're saying. I think I know what you're saying. I think I can maybe make some examples a little bit, very, very high level of our conversation. Can I share a little bit of that? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll be very, very generic, but specific enough where I think I can put some points on exactly what you're saying in a specific way that hopefully will be useful to some people out there.
Cool.
So, I did venture capital a long time ago with one of the former CEOs of, in my opinion, former CEOs of Apple, and great. I mean, it was like the perfect situation, and it was, as I was a young lawyer, and it was just, the opportunity was immense, but the fund never got fully raised, in my opinion. Again, I'll edge anything, not all from entertainment purpose, all my personal opinion only. And, I was able to do some stuff, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but it was just a phenomenal opportunity. But unfortunately, it wasn't. And again, that's why, I've been down these roads. It's great to raise money. It's great to raise a fund, but it's first thing, you got to raise the fund. Second thing, you have to be successful. I mean, there's just a ton that goes into it. Almost nobody other than what I said before walks into, hey, day one, I just graduated from business school and I'm going to be a partner at Sequoia. That doesn't happen, right? So it was a thing. And then I did my own thing, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to get into all that. Everybody knows me, knows what the deal is. I go to Hopkins, I get this, and then they started this 1812 Ventures. They're trying to raise a life science fund and maybe have some kind of relationship, in my opinion, with Hopkins, stuff like that. I won't get too much into that. Didn't raise a fund, right? But I had exposure, and we were doing some stuff, and I thought, but anyway, so I've been very much wanting to get back into venture capital for a while, but there's a lot of things were happening on my end with life and moving around and different things like that. And I understand where I'm at. I understand what people are looking for in the venture capital scene. I know that I've been in the game, out of the game. I've seen the game. In some ways I have massive strengths because I've seen we talked about this. I've seen because of my boss, former, I have met and seen the very, very best. John Doerr, Mike Moritz, I can go on down the list. Don Valentine. I mean, just legends. And myself bringing clients in the firm. I mean, that were extremely successful, super high percentage of getting funded. I know I have a hot hand. I know how to pick deals, screen deals, work deals, do the whole thing. In my opinion, again, I'll edge anything, not giving advice. Okay. But it's been a minute and the game's changed. And I know that out there, I felt like my value is here. It's very, very high. If I can do a lot of different things. And I think that just depending on what I do in different sectors and what level I come into, it just depends. I'm somewhere between 200 to 500. Now, do I think I can get more than that? Yeah, I think I can get 7 figures, but it's got to be the perfect job. It's going to take me a long time to do it. And, between now and then, I got to make it work. Is it less than that? Sure, it's less than that if it's a different thing. But when you were explaining what this opportunity was, I'm like, John, you're like, well, what do you need to do? I was like, I need this. If I have to, absolutely, because this is super strategic for me. We're not negotiating. We're just talking. And this is the transparency. I know where I'm coming from. I know where I'm up to. And hopefully you felt like I was being super transparent, honest with you. And I talk straight. I'm like, look, I can do it bare bones for this. Do I want to be in this place? Kind of not so. That's a high cost of living there. We're kind of trying to be over here. But if I need to have a place there and do this, like I was willing to, I'm willing to make it work. But then you're like, well, listen, I think you're high value, but they're looking at candidates that they can get for a fraction of that are younger, that they can just tell them what to do, and it's a third, it's a half the cost. Those are the kind of conversations and the kind of honesty and transparency, and knowing where you're at as a candidate, knowing what the recruiter wants, what the company wants, what your client wants, and just being able to make those conversations, those connections, as you said, instead of playing games and trying to stunt or front, because that just doesn't do anybody any good. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it touches upon a few things, right? The person who knows their client and the person who engages with their client in a way that they truly understand where there are not just, we're looking between point A and point C, find somebody for B somewhere in there. But you really understand kind of the flexibilities on either side of A and the other side of C, right? And, I think when you, not only just from a financial perspective, from an expertise standpoint or years of experience standpoint, you have all this kind of cohesive understanding of what the client wants, comparative, or let me not say comparative, but in conjunction with the market's information. If there are consistencies across the two of those, and then the recruiter can translate that to, the candidate, that is the foundation to the start of a really good conversation. I totally agree with you. It's that transparency and that ability to have that type of conversation, that will really make a difference.
And you were saying to me, listen, I think this is what you can do, and I think this is where it can go, and this is why the opportunity for me. I'm like, listen, I know, and I've talked to some of my mentors and professors that are big time in the business world, that are teaching at Ivy League, big time. I don't want to name the names, but big Ivy League names right now, and sometimes you got to take a step back. Like this is what you were saying before in terms of reverse engineering. If you really, really want to be in this game, take a step back or 2 steps back to take 3 to 5 or 10 steps forward, because I know I have confidence in what I can do with the platform. I know it can just be an absolute grand slam and then it's game over. A year from now, the world looks very, very different. But again, that's being able to know what you can do and taking that risk factor, being able to take that leap of faith in yourself. Now, I'm not a kid coming out of college anymore, so I've got to think about that. Do you take, again, that's that conversation with the professionals. Do you take that safe bet, or do you take something a little bit more risky and bet in yourself? And that goes back to my conversations, Gary Vee, other people out there that say it's so. And then we've got a question here for the comments. We'll bring that in. I see that, Ilan. A lot of people. It's very trendy to say you're an entrepreneur. Are you really? I mean, are you really ready to take that level of risk and stuff? And you have to understand what that's about. So I just want to again, I don't want to get too much into our conversation, but I just thought that was very timely and to put some real detail that was hopefully helpful to some people out there. We got a quick question here, and I want to get your reaction. Go ahead.
Before you jump on that,
go ahead.
One thing that I think is really important, I say this a lot to people, is we're kind of, talking about this knowing yourself, knowing your risk factors, right? But if you're well aware of it in your brain, that's fine. If you know the backstory, that's good. But one thing that I say to a lot of people is when you send your CV or your resume into somebody, you're not there to defend yourself. You're not there to defend,
that's a great point.
Hey, this is why I had 2 years off. I had a child, and I needed to take the time off. I just wanted to be with my kid. You're not there to defend yourself. So my best advice is know your risks and know how to address those before they become a problem. And if the problem is I'm sending my CVs, I'm having great conversation with recruiters, they're finding me jobs that make sense to me and they align, but I'm just not hearing anything back. Well, what are those red flags or those things that maybe somebody on the other end of that CV or receiving that CV says, well, this doesn't make sense to me. No, it's easier to just put it over to the side than to call that person and set up an interview. I'll probably find somebody else, right? So know your risk and address your risk before they become a risk.
Would you do that in the CV, in the cover letter? Would you do that in direct? Like, what's the best way?
Great question.
I mean, let me ask you this too. I'm cool, but I mean, I'm not, no pressure. You've been very good. How are we on time? Because there's so many things I can talk to you about, and I want to know how to. You're okay?
No, I think my wife was supposed to come home at some point, but my kids are over at my mother-in-law's across the street, so my wife's not here, so I assume she's probably over there. But,
okay, perfect. Because I want to. So answer that question, then we'll get to aliens, and because I want to get into a lot of those types of questions about what to do as a candidate and how to navigate things in just a little bit. But there's a couple other things I want to hit first too.
I mean, definitely. As far as like, I missed the question, by the way. So the
question was okay. Like you said. If you don't call me, we're not on the phone, I don't have a chance to tell my story.
Oh, yeah,
I just send a resume over, but you're saying if you know yourself and you know where there may be some questions from a recruiter standpoint, how do I address that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just to kind of talk about how to build your brand, how to build your journey, how to get involved and integrate with clients or prospective employers or recruiters. I put out content around that, but I'm absolutely happy to kind of map that out for everybody, maybe in a different podcast, a different day. And if people are interested, I could kind of quickly just put it together for them, between now and then. But, how do you address these objections before they become a risk to you being accepted as a candidate? And I think simply stated, it's transparency. It's being honest. Tell your journey, right? In your executive summary, there's a little bit about your journey, and you have free reign to do that. But additionally, let's say it is a career gap for a few years because you had kids or something like that, right? It's okay to put, mother, and then between 15 and 16. Okay, that makes sense to me, but at least it's there. I don't have a question. What was she doing? Was she working at Kmart for a year?
What about the pandemic? Like, how does that, like, with the last couple of years, like, how has that impacted, like, gap time and whatever that, what's the discourse in the recruiting world on that? The last couple 3 years. This
is going to be more of a macro statement or answer to that, only because for the most part, life sciences was kept as an essential part, right?
Of course.
So for me, everybody still had to go back into the lab. Yeah. Everybody still had to do that.
And thank you for our great people in life sciences and health sciences for all the great work that you've been doing. So we appreciate that. But so right. So in your specific field, it wasn't as much of a thing, but what do you have? I can
definitely answer it. I mean, in terms of, how do you address that? How do you kind of put it on your CV so that it kind of makes sense, or at least tells part of the story? I think, again, going back to it, across the pandemic, there was a lot of reason for people to change their jobs. The great resignation, right? Oh, what happened? You had a great job at a bank, and then you decided to start your own Pop-Tart pop shop or something,
or travel or whatever it is.
Whatever. So, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, we all kind of, as adults, not children that are in college that are going to come into the recruiting space or talent acquisition space in a few years or this year, but as adults, we all kind of face the same thing. So there's a level of camaraderie around that. And if the question is answered, then it's not a big deal. But if there is a gap, then there is a question, right? Like, for example, I see people who send me their CV, and their CV ends at January or March of 2020, right? And since then, there's nothing there. So the last job they had was 2 years ago. To me, that's a huge question. What'd you do? Were you just chilling? And that's okay if you want to take 2 years and just chill. But at the same time, I shouldn't have
talk about it. Let's understand where you're at. Where are you at? What brought you to this place, and how do we move forward? Kind of, is that what?
Yeah. And
it's like a story.
You were a contractor. You had a contract for 6 months, and then you were out for 6 months. What were you doing? I was working at home trying to build up my own entrepreneurial thing, and subsequently it didn't work out. So I got another job 6 months later. It's okay, but just make sure you answer the questions and make sure that you understand what the questions are, right? Big as a recruiter, there's big gaps. There's educational gaps. There's questions on why did you go from being, everybody knows that there's that first job that you had, right? I was working at Applebee's or UPS store or whatever. I mean, if that stuff is on your CV, you're definitely at the junior level regardless.
Yeah.
But, at the level at which I'm working, there's a gap. And it's because of, I went for my college, I graduated, and then there was a year gap between me and, my first position. While I was searching for jobs, I was doing something, for myself, that kind of thing. I was helping my parents' business. I mean, all of this, if you were doing something, you should put it on there. Like if you took a year off from being a biochemist and went to go do, be a milk farmer and help your parents for a year, then tell us that you were a milk farmer at your parents' place for a year. And at least we know you were doing something. You weren't just sitting there going, "Oh well, I'm out of a job now. I'm going to watch a bunch of Netflix." Like that's not what we want.
I totally agree, and I'm gonna amplify that point and with the story too. And I think so. A lot of people, I think, are, if something didn't work or it's not quite ready, or hey, I tried this lemonade stand and it totally failed. Exactly, they won't put it down. Whereas for myself, like you see my LinkedIn, right? And I've got all kinds of different things, and I'll talk to people like, well, wait a minute, what is this? And what is this? You still doing this? Oh yeah, it's this. And I mean, I'm always doing like 2, 5, 10. I'm active, and it's funny because there was I'll characterize without being super specific. There was a lawyer who's at a big name firm, and I'll say this way: worked at Wilson and WSGR, and now at a partner at another big AmLaw 100 AmLaw 50. I can't remember what, but a big big law partner, big law somewhere else. And when I first started, like it looks at me like, whoa, this is my impression. Like hey, this guy's a little different, right? I can't believe it's almost like I can't believe someone like that worked for Wilson Sonsini. And then, we did different things, and I had my big conference, and maybe, I was talking to them about doing stuff, and the conference was super successful, America's Venture Capital, and people could see my videos up there, and I need to put more videos up there, and I apologize to some of to everybody. I know it's like, I want to do it for the people that were there. Some of these may not get the most views, but it's just anyway, it's more of a labor of love type of deal, whatever. We have enough more up there, but it's because of the volume. This is my own little, because of the size of the files, and this conference went on all day. It just takes a long time to shot in 4K. Anyway, side note. And so you could see where there was an evolution of thinking. And I thought about, well, do I want to go, what do I want to do? And how do I work? There was in my opinion, there was an evolution of thinking in this person over the years in regards to me. And I got a message from this person not that long ago. And they've been very successful in their career, but more traditional law career, right? And like, hey John, you're a true entrepreneur, blah 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 blah, and had some other nice words. I just wanted to put that word out there, and it's like, yeah, I'm your client, not literally, but this is like right, like sometimes we just can't. I've done the same deals from different parts of the table. Right. And if you're able to see this as a recruiter or as a client, right, you understand, holy smokes. And this is what the conversation we had, too, in terms of like you can't find anybody, in my opinion, with the range and level of success that I've had across the zero to IPO life cycle or in the sectors, communication, sales, blah, 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 as I have. But if you don't understand that, or you can't look at that certain, and again, with my own, peculiarities, uniqueness, risk factors, whatever, if you don't understand it, you'll say, hey, well, he doesn't fit in this box. And this box is like, if you haven't done law in 2 years or 1 year, like forget it, then you can't understand that. And I think that goes exactly what you're saying in terms of being able to tell your story, know your story, being transparent about it, having those conversations. And it's not always easy because a lot of times, I've talked to colleagues of mine that are, I think, just ridiculously talented and probably should have an easier time than I do getting a job, and they've sent out 500 resumes on LinkedIn and they get nothing. Whereas with myself, in my opinion, I'll let you anything. If I send out a bunch of stuff, I'm going to get stuff. I went over with my wife. I mean, I've been looking at stuff for about a month or so. And before she left for Israel for the family, like there was like 12 different things. And I think that's because, particularly with LinkedIn, like you can look at my stuff and it's all there. I've got videos, I've got everything. There's all kinds of proof points. But I just say this to set some table. I want to come back to that. I don't know if I'm being a good talk show host here, but we have this question. I want to get to this question from Ilian, but I want to drill into that. After we answer this question, I want to drill into if I'm looking for a job or as a candidate or building my brand, because they all relate. How do we do that? And is recruiting broken? And I'm not saying that it is, but how do I improve my chances? How can we make the system better, et cetera, et cetera? Let's get to this. Okay. Ilian, I'm putting this up blind. I hope it's a good question. Thank you, Jonathan and John. I agree that one has to be honest. That's how I find what I truly want, and then I'm happy. And the people whom I'm working with as well, it's a win for everybody. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, go ahead.
Just to kind of speak on that, I mean, there's two things here, right? We're juxtaposing people who are active, people who know what they want, versus this level of people who are the probably generally just fall into what I'd call like the normal category, the safe, the secure, the ladder climbing individuals, right? And there are purely core competencies that somebody who is more entrepreneurial versus, risk adverse there are core competencies that are just innate in somebody. And I have quite literally, I use these all the time, like on a counter, a quarterly basis. They're competency cards. There's not much to them, but basically what it does is it's like sales professional, professional appearance, or, certain competencies. And the more that I kind of go through them with a particular perspective, this is how I want my work life to be. This is how I want my personal life to be. I kind of come up with a group for each one of those paradigms, if you will. And then I look at all of them and say, okay, which ones are the most common that happens, in all of these, approaches or paradigms. But by having a sense of these competency cards, and I highly suggest anybody do it. It was what my mentor told me to do. It told me, like, take a week off, go do these competency cards, these personality tests, these get to know yourself, these TQs. And by doing all of that background work, you'll get a better sense of what is good for you. And subsequently, when you know what's good for you, you might actually be surprised. Holy shit, like I'm actually okay with being kind of into taking risks, or I'm actually I thought I want to do something entrepreneurial.
We apologize for the language and everything like that. It's the internet. It's not radio. If it was radio, I'd be hitting the button. But it's fine. It's fine. It's okay. I just want to say, just because we're live on LinkedIn and everything, I just want to say. But I want to say, and Julian, I know you've got a question too. And I want to keep you going, but I'm just thought of something, and we'll talk about it more offline. I just thought of something I want to talk to you about, a project. I think it'd be phenomenal. I love what you're doing right here. Keep going, please. I love this idea.
No, so just to kind of come back to it, right, and just refresh it for everybody. At the end of the day, you understand yourself, you understand where you are, you're more now aware of these certain competencies, and that may actually open up the window or the door for you to kind of start to go, well, let me test the water. Let's see how cold it is outside there. And then you take what I've said before. You take that first initial step. You map everything out. You start to find who it is that you need to engage with. And then you have the boldness and courage and confidence to go to somebody and say, this is what I'm trying to do. That kind of approach, I think, is really, really powerful. And if you're able to do that in conjunction with the person who makes relationships day in and day out, well, then you've got kind of this kind of balance. This really strong, powerful tool. You've got Thor's hammer, in your hand, if you will, right? Yeah. I think to kind of get back to it, you said, is recruiting broken? It's absolutely broken when it comes to certain people and certain characteristics, and the two of those two groups kind of clashing. You have somebody who's not built their network. It just started only 2-3 years as a recruiter, right? They don't know really much about the macro market trends. They don't know what their clients need. They didn't test the flexibilities or the commitment from the client. And the same thing for the person who's applying, doesn't really know kind of what they're doing. They're trying to reach for the stars. I might be able to get this associate director role, even though I've got 1 year of industry experience. And so these things kind of clash, and subsequently the result is a negative result or no feedback. And now the person who's worked really hard, the recruiter, they're like, we had a great conversation, but there's nothing that I can say that's positive. So then there's like people who just don't have the courage to say, hey, listen, we got to hold off on this, or we don't know, what the client really wants or whatever. So you get these kind of problems that occur that are really, at the end of the day, they boil down to a few things. It's whether or not the person gives you feedback. It's whether or not the person's going to be honest and not salesy. They're going to be truthful and tell you what's going on. And it's a matter of whether or not they know what they're talking about, right?
Yes.
Anybody can look up cell culture on LinkedIn
Right.
or on a search bar, but do you really know what cell culture is? Do you know what units you're using or all of that? So from my perspective, recruitment is broken and not broken.
Right,
It's
I
not
agree. I think
broken
that's
in the
right.
sense if you can cohesively put these pieces together, partnering and collaborating. If you were a business, yourself as a brand and your business was to just collaborate with anybody that walks in the door and offers service, you might end up in a bunch of really bad deals, right? But if you go out and try to find actively a good recruiter and you know what you're doing, then, and they work in that space, it's bound to be a better result than just, whatever falls into my LinkedIn account. Of course, it's good to answer those messages and build your relationships, but I think, the two work really well together. They're butter and corn.
Right, yeah.
You know?
So and that probably helps to talk a little bit about. And Julian, give me 1 second. I'll get your question on here. How does recruiting typically work, and what is your because I think that we got to put that piece of the table of the puzzle here. How does recruiting typically work in terms of you get paid when you place someone and you get a percentage of the first year? I mean, I think that's or how, what do the business models look like, and what does your typical day look like? I mean, I think people, if you're dealing with 500 candidates a day, I'm not just throwing a number out there, then I think people understand, well, it's hard to give great feedback to everybody. So those two questions I think would be helpful to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, the integration between recruiter and client is a hard-fought battle, right? Yeah. The ability to collaborate amongst many, many different recruiters out there who are asking for the same jobs or trying to get the same, get on the same role or whatever, it's hard to do. And so you're kind of possessive with that a little bit. You want to be a little bit strategic from a recruiter standpoint. You want to be a little bit strategic about how you approach the client, right? If the client is saying, we can't sponsor visas, we need people here every day, etc., and you're getting out of 10 CVs, 8 that are visa required or, sponsorships, then it can be very hard to be like, unless you talk with your client, which you should be doing that anyways, but nonetheless, it can be really hard to kind of not be tempted to say, all right, let me see if I can put a visa candidate in front and see if they'll take it. These are the best of the visa candidates. There are people who will take those risks, but I think from the standpoint of, trying to do your very best, you may not use those 8 candidates and only put in front of your client 2, even though some of those candidates who still would have needed a $2,000 visa, which is nothing, at the end of the day, people miss out on those opportunities because they're trying to put the best people in front of the clients that they had to work hard to get, right? And convince the client that they could do the search. And on top of that, you have the client playing certain games around, well, we want to use multiple recruiters, which is kind of like using multiple, for sale signs on your front yard.
Right.
That doesn't look good. So we have to kind of talk with the client and kind of address some of these issues. And then once we get the contract, we want to put the best people in front of them. And then at the end of the day, basically, we work for the client to help give them the best talent and the best understanding of the macro market of what they can get, right? And then you can kind of pick as the client out of that group. That's the ideal situation. And you really only get that through retained work. But at the end of the day, basically, if you could kind of bring those elements, I guess, together, I feel like I lost my train of thought. But I think at the end of the day, basically, if there is an element here where, well, I think I lost my train of thought.
No,
so
it's fine.
I don't want to try.
No, you're fine. And maybe this will help, maybe not. But when I say, and when we talk about recruiting, it's broken. I mean, obviously it's not people are getting placed. If you have if you have, hey, candidate or company's looking for this and candidate does this and it all matches up. Right. But when I say broken, I think what I'm trying to talk about is that there is an inefficiency or many inefficiencies and talent gets missed, whether it's because someone in the blockchain space is company X is putting out requirements for 10 years of something when something's technology's only been around for 5 years, right? And that's just, silly things like that. Or it's because that, someone doesn't, is maybe an entrepreneurial candidate or took a few years off or didn't have whatever it is. But they can do a fantastic job. And it's that, and I'll give an example, super quick, and then we'll get to Julian's thing. In the automotive space or something like that, I'm just crazy good at that stuff. But that is like many sales, that is a never-ending treadmill. It's a never-ending treadmill. Units. What have you? And then you had a great month, great. So you went from here to here and start over again at zero. And they look at myself like, you're overqualified or whatever it is. But I've been lucky and blessed enough to have run into a few places that, and I don't want to be too specific, but one in particular, an organization that understands me, understands what I do. They leave me alone. It's like, hey, you do your thing. We don't care. Basically, I'm not alleging anything, whatever. But in a lot of spaces, lots of flexibility, tremendous amounts of flexibility. And guess what? I produce, which is the same thing, in my opinion, that I experienced when I was at Wilson Sonsini working for legendary Mario Rosati. At the time I walked into that, which was kind of crazy, right? As a new associate, I remember it like it was yesterday at his home in Atherton, gorgeous home. And I hope I can, and Mario was just so good to me because I got an opportunity to host GameSpot TV. So how many people go to work for Big Law and now say, oh, by the way, can I go do this TV show on video games? And back then, video games weren't they were business, right, but they weren't like the monster business that it is now. Of course, you had EA, you have successes, but you do not have, it's not like it is now. And he's like, hey, as long as you get your work done, this is my paraphrase, I don't care what you do, it's fine, it's great. Because they were Larry Sonsini, John Wilson, John Goodrich, Mario Rosati, they were entrepreneurs, they understood it. And he gave me, a lot of flexibility, being able to go out and speak to Wharton, being able to go to Garage.com events, being able to go do stuff with the Women's Technology Cluster, Panasonic Digital Incubator. And guess what? Surprise, surprise. I'm going with my clients to the venture capital pitch on San Antonio Roads. Tons of business for the firm. If you give me flexibility, great things can happen. And that goes back to the whole thing. This is why I'm saying recruiting might be broken, because I think at the end of the day, you have to say, business is complicated and it's simple. If you can add value, that's how you cannot expect compensation without adding value. If you create the environment where your team can do the best work, the FedEx model, right? Empower people, thin, and we see this as Lean Six Sigma. So empower people, make thin organizations, let them do their thing, let them do their best work. Obviously, within the structure of, make sure you're achieving your goals. But I think that I think there's a lack of, we're missing talent. And I'm kind of like you. I started out hot, and I hope this is making sense to people. Right. Be able to. I wish companies were more, and HR departments were much more imaginative, and managers were much more flexible and imaginative about how to work with people and how to work with talent. And I think that's part of the great resignation with the whole pandemic. I think people, this is my personal opinion, I think people are like, well, geez, if everything's at risk, if the whole world might not be whatever, then I want to work from it, maybe in somewhere that's warm and not have to deal with winter. I don't want to have to commute for a while. I don't want to have to sit in a building for 70 hours. I don't want to have to go to all these meetings, stuff like that. Like, why can't I? If you let me do what I do, I can do great things, right? I wouldn't sit there and tell Michelangelo or Van Gogh or whomever how to do a painting, right? I won't tell them that you have to paint for 5 hours a day and you have to be in a cubicle or whatever. Like, I mean, some jobs need more structure, need more collaboration, but I think that's what I'm trying to say, and I hope that made some sense to some people out there.
Well, let me just kind of feed on that. I mean, in a lot of ways, it can seem broken because at the end of the day, kind of what the main goal, at least from a recruiter and from a client standpoint, is, it's really kind of who can control the box, right? We talked about this element of kind of having flexibilities and visibility on the side of A and the other side of C, right? These parameters of what I would call the box, and subsequently, who controls that box? Is it the person? Just think about the person that's in those seats, right? They went for the comfortable opportunity. They climbed the ladder. And so everything fits in that box. And so if the client and the recruiter are not collaborative and controlling the box together, and I mean that equally, like really trying to say,
yes,
okay, based on market versus based on what you want, etc. If there's the client just really still controls the box, then at the end of the day, the flexibilities, etc., are just not going to be there, right? And it's not that the person isn't open-minded, because I've run into plenty of hiring managers who are super open-minded, but at the end of the day, we end up closing those roles because they were flexible. Now, let me also just make an announcement of probably great proportions here for a lot of people who have the same problem. What you just explained is the trend at which we are going to see manifested in recruitment and in talent acquisition. This idea of people saying, wait, I need to be more open-minded. I need to take that step. Yeah. And subsequently, those people then go into these positions year after year. And before you know it, 10 years down the line, the discourse thinks very differently than the way we did with all the old seniors who survived before the pandemic. So the good news is that it's going to happen at some point where there's going to be this natural idea of flexibility. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be recruiters, and there's always going to be clients, and there's always going to be candidates. And in that meantime, the thing you want to look for as a candidate is somebody who's willing to control the box, or not as willing, but does control the box with the client. And that's where you'll get opportunities, you'll get feedback, you'll get a streamlined process, you'll get an understanding and visibility of what the whole thing looks like, and subsequently then it comes to a positive review. Some things take time, right? John, you and I, we work in VC. Just some projects just take a little bit of time.
No, I knew that. I know that. It's all, it's all good, and I love it. And I'll say this, company, and you're right, because you're fantastic in my opinion. You're great. We had a great conversation. Immediately hit it off and stuff. I know. I don't want to name his name. A really cool guy. Someone I just happened to meet out for a walk. They know who they are, and they were big time at one of the biggest companies. Recruiter at one of the biggest, hottest tech companies. Went over to another big hot tech company, and we had great conversations. I think he's doing good. I had Emily Landon, crypto recruiter, on the crypto recruiters and had great conversations on the show. And so I think you're right. I think it is changing, but I think if talent is always, the VC, the best VCs, team is number one, right? That's what they invest in. It's not even this market space, it's the team, because if you have a great team, they'll figure it out. And different people have different theories about, VC, what's most important, whatever. But obviously team's super important. If talent is your most important thing, and you're a high growth, startup company, high risk venture, whatever you want to call it, you want to be a unicorn, why aren't you focusing more on that? Why aren't you taking more risk on that? And here's what I mean. I've seen these things on LinkedIn, and the LinkedIn team will like it, about these things that go viral on LinkedIn, like five interview processes, 9 interview processes, just crazy stuff. And listen, I don't know. Maybe it's something for some, super governmental nuclear. I don't know. Maybe sometimes that's needed, but and I was explaining this I did some consulting for a venture fund, and not that long ago. It was a new fund, corporate. You can see it on I'm sure it's out there, whatever. We talked about it. I don't want to name names here, but part of it was like, okay, here's, we'll talk about what you want to talk about. But let me tell you, and listen, how about this? This is exactly what I said in my America's Venture Capital, kickoff open. So that video's up there on YouTube. So we can talk about that. It's about the pace of deals, right? Because like, okay, so let me put it this way and it'll make sense. And if you're a recruiter and you're dealing with a top candidate, you do not have time because that candidate's going to have a bunch of offers from a lot of other people, right? I mean, I know in certain sectors, I don't need to put a resume out. I just need to make a phone call, right? If I want, it depends on what I want to do. Now, and hey, I'm available. Oh, okay. And so secondly, similarly, on the, like you said, on the some of these jobs, people don't even know that they're available. When I try to explain all these different new tech hubs or wannabe tech hubs, like, oh, the model of Silicon Valley, we know it. If everyone knows it, how come no one can duplicate it? Because one of the critical things is understanding the speed and aggression of deals. Meaning that like I've seen deals done, on almost like right there. Like I'm not gonna say literally on a napkin, but there's always the back of the napkin things. There's Bucks Cafe, there's Il Fornaio, downtown Palo Alto. I mean, like deals get done very, very rapidly. And think about it logically, right? If you know that so-and-so thinks this is a great deal, or you hear this great pitch and if you have enough experience that it all lines up, and are you going to take the risk that deal is going to sit out there? You do not have, as a corporate VC, with corporate VCs, a lot of times, like you're not the Sequoia, you're not the Klein, or you're not that big name. So if a big name comes in, they're going to take the whole deal. So as a new corporate VC or someone that wants just a seat at the table, just kind of a follow-on fund, how do you think you have 2 months, 3 months, 9 interviews, 5 interviews? And again, that's the same analogy holds, right? To take this time to string this thing out on a hot deal or on a hot candidate. You don't. Nope. You do not. And so that's what I'm saying. Like you, by putting up these crazy processes and extending the time, you are automatically eliminating your opportunities for those hot candidates, for those hot deals. I think, does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing, right?
It's the same thing.
A candidate, great background. I'm also interviewing at 3 other places. We got to move. We got to talk. We got to make these things happen, right? And at the end of the day, there's stopgap measures when it comes to, at least the world I'm in. You get talent acquisition, and they try to kind of put in their own input, or let's push it to when it's convenient for me. I don't want to have the interview tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. Let's move it to next Thursday. Okay, that's the next open date. And it's like, guys, it's speed. It's activity. I'm telling you, this is what it is. So, again, there's a lot of stopgap measures. There's a lot of people to kind of get buy-in. And, I think we're in a society where we want everybody to be comfortable, right? Back in the day when the CEO was the head honcho, the CEO said, pull the trigger. You pulled that trigger. Like that's what it was, right?
Let me just say it true, and I'll promise. This is what I'm saying. These entrepreneurial companies and again, I know things change, and when after you become public and just as you grow and you the needs change. I understand that, but these companies that got there by being so entrepreneurial, at some point they hire this whole HR staff that didn't found the company, doesn't know that, all this type of and are very removed. In my opinion, from that entrepreneurial mindset. And like you said, the CEO is no longer involved, and those other people are no longer involved. And now this is what happens. This is a classic story where this company stops being entrepreneurial and stops reinventing itself. Now, the best companies, IBM, you see this Meta now trying to, they do reinvent themselves, right? I mean, they do reinvent themselves and figure out how to remain entrepreneurial. But I think that's again where I say recruiting is broken, because here is your talent coming in here, and now you've stopped understanding how to get the best talent and be an entrepreneur. And I use the Tom Brady analogy, and I love the Tom Brady analogy. 6th round pick. That means every and terrible combine, horrible combine in my opinion. Every single NFL team, they all missed him at least 5 times. It wasn't until the New England Patriots finally picked him up in the 6th round. And that's the best quarterback of all time. But that just shows you that it can happen anywhere, anytime. You have to be focused on talent. That's why I love having people like you, recruiters, on the show, because it's so critical. It's so important. And I appreciate your time. Let me get Julian's comment here, and then you know, whenever you want to wind down, I'm good. Okay, Julian, in the beginning of my life science career, okay, I assume you've seen great career progression from some clients and some stagnate. Any advice how to establish a great question?
Establishing a great career.
So he's just starting out. How is he going to be successful in his career? Maybe not specifically, but just what have you seen that's worked that keeps people sort of progressing in life science, and what are some things to maybe avoid?
I work with scientists every day. I work with clinicians a lot.
You're
so I know I've said this before, right? I don't know where you sit, Julian, in terms of your career within life sciences, if it's project management or biostatistics or tech ops or quality. I don't know, so I can't really speak to that specifically in terms of, I have experience broadly across the entire life cycle. I've done pharmacovigilance, medical affairs, clinical development. I've done, medical monitors, medical writing, quality. I've worked in science for a long time. So everything from discovery to the clinic. So I really do understand it. And then my exposure as a leader across a few different businesses is this idea of, understanding the support structures, right? Program management, all of that, or project management. I really don't know where you sit. So specifically, I would say over the whole, right? The biggest thing is consistency. It's the timing. It's kind of, well, these are so macro. It's difficult to answer that. I mean,
but let me maybe this helps. How about this? Particularly today, how important, and people maybe don't think about this maybe as much in life science. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I mean, because we see some sectors and some spaces are more entrepreneurial than others, or more, communication, PR savvy than others. How important is it to get a mentor, build your own brand, talk about your successes and share those within the leadership without seeming like, you just want too much of the, how do you go about getting those challenges and building your brand and being able to communicate that brand in a way that's going to work well or best in life science?
Yeah. Okay. I just kind of looked at it. I actually do know Julian.
Oh, cool.
So that's hilarious. I do know where Julian sits and what he needs to
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
But, I think just to kind of get back into it, I mean, if you're somebody who, in particularly to the case of where Julian is, if I remember correctly, and I talked to a lot of people in one day, but I think we were talking about some pharmacology jobs, right? And we talk about these four sectors across the life science industry: CMOs, CROs, biotechs, global pharma companies, right? Yeah. And there's a vast difference between step A and step B, right? I would kind of categorize them that way because you can kind of see them that way. In step A, CROs, CMOs, you get your bonus profiteering, you get your base salary, and that's good. That's a great place to be, right? Minimally your needs are met. But at larger pharmaceuticals and biotechnology companies, you get these elements of long-term incentives, same with bonus, and then, your base salary. But the long story short, basically, is you kind of have to, when you're in a earlier stage in your career, you have to foundationally set yourself up, knowing and working with somebody who's going to be able to kind of help you avoid those issues. So, for example, Julie and I were talking about this opportunity today, and we were talking about this idea where when you get to a certain level, clients are really asking, what is your engagement, your knowledge, your expertise in managing CRO teams or CMO teams? And if you have that experience already early in your career, rather than later, you took a financial hit early by not getting those long-term incentives for the first 2 years of your career. But what you're avoiding is getting to an associate director level and then having to step back or take an equal lateral
reboot almost.
Yeah, exactly. So these are some of the things that you can avoid just by knowing some basics and having somebody who literally just speaks this stuff day in and day out, progressing in companies and how to progress in companies and to posture yourself in that way. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come from this idea that you touched upon, which is knowing yourself, knowing where you want to go, and subsequently creating a journey and a story that makes sense and being able to communicate that with your managers and your mentors, right? I remember at one point I met with one of my mentors, or my mentor, And he was just telling me, tell me who you are, right? And I kind of was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And he's like, listen, you got the nice car, you got the nice watch, you got a nice shirt on, it looks good, but I don't think you know yourself, right? And I was like, I was broken at the time. I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, that's wow.
It killed me. Honestly, killed me.
That's heavy.
Like, no. But
what'd you say?
He gave me this advice, and I think at the time I was kind of just like, okay, then if he's like, I wouldn't hire you. That was the thing that broke my heart. He was like, I wouldn't hire you. I don't think you know yourself. And luckily, I was younger in my career. I was searching and seeking. So I was like, okay, all right. So what do I got to do? And he gave me some advice. And like I said, he gave me the competency cards there. Told me to go buy these. Told me to buy a few books and a few different, take a few different tests. And subsequently to analyze that and think on it, meditate, and kind of just come to a place where I understand it, right? And then to evolve in that world and do it over and over again. And you heard me recommend that earlier in the show.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I like that a lot.
But knowing yourself and knowing what you want to do and your competencies are going to allow you to understand kind of what you want to do, right? If you're not the detail orientated, the super organized and clean, then environmental monitoring is probably not your gig, right? Because that's like very, very detail orientated, every spot of the lab. If your gig is more, hey, I want to talk with people, I want to engage, and I'm a clinician and I know my stuff, but I don't want to do patient care and I don't want to, okay, well then maybe medical affairs is something. You're the face and the voice of the company, So it really just depends on where you are, what your competencies are, and ultimately where you're going, and what the string between where you are and where you want to go is the communication between you and your manager, communication between you and your mentors and so on.
And this sounds maybe cliche or whatever, and like your comments on it, Jonathan. Listen, it's easier said than done. I understand that, especially if you're really looking for something and you need something. But be thankful sometimes for the opportunities that you don't get, that maybe you thought you wanted, because if they don't get you and it's not a fit, or you can't be yourself or do your best work and you're just going to be miserable, but hey, it's a prestigious job, or you just, nobody likes to, nobody likes rejection or whatever it is, but there's times where it's like, I thought I wanted something, or the door didn't open, and I look back, I'm like, oh wow, well thank goodness, because of whatever, and maybe they're super great, but it just wasn't great for me, right? And
I couldn't be me, right? If you don't know yourself, then you're not going to be happy with your job and your activity day in and day out. So I think that's the essence there. Yeah, definitely.
Well, so okay, as we wind down here, like what are some of the key takeaways? Like, how can people, if they're thinking about a job, they're in school, they're looking for a job now, like, do you really want to, obviously it's all of it, but what's the most important thing? Is it working on your LinkedIn? Is it networking? Is it working on the resume? What are the changes? What's happening in the market? What are the hot sectors of life science? Should I start gearing up for certain, like, do you gear up for certain sectors? I know everybody's like, oh, I'm going to be all into blockchain and crypto now. Like, do I, or whatever it is. And again, I'm just, I'm not giving any advice or anything like that, but like, how do you think about that? Do you sort of think that it's good to sort of gear towards certain sectors? Do you try to future cast if you're a candidate? How do I improve my chances as a candidate?
I'm lucky that I don't have the same position as an academic mentor to young postdoctoral fellows or young students, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are getting groomed into, hey, look into microbiome, look into liquid nanoparticles, look into, like you said, digital health and these things. They kind of have that insight already. They're also, PIs, they're getting, people other companies are coming to them and saying, hey, this is what we're trying to work on. So, luckily I'm not in that position to be so future cast years in advance. But I think from a recruiter standpoint, we do want to kind of stay congruent to the market and what the trends are and what's going to be hot. I saw the immuno-oncology wave. I've now seen the cell and gene therapy wave. I'm now seeing microbiome stuff, LMPs. I mean, that's the direction, right? And I don't have any control over that. But I think, being proactive while you're young and as a student and listening, and not just, this is what people do when they're young. They just talk. But I think you got to listen to kind of where are the patterns? What am I hearing over time and time again? And then kind of point yourself in that direction first and foremost. And then as you start to kind of point yourself into a direction, you start to align yourself first and foremost, with that understanding that we've mentioned many times. I think is this idea of then establishing yourself as somebody in that discourse. And how do you do that? You then take your CV on paper, you take your social online, and you take, any sort of academic or accolades, and you collect, right? You're a farmer at this point.
Yep.
So you're farming through your CV, and you're saying, okay, what is good? What do I want to highlight? And what is bad? What are those red flags, and how do I answer them? Then you go to social media, and you say, what is it that captures people? It's videos, it's icons, it's short and abbreviated, executive summary and all of this. Does the person use the discourse words, the words that we use, in science or in tech ops or whatever? Do they use those same kind of vernacular? So that, an assessment of your paper, your assessment of your social, and then an assessment of just kind of what do you need to do? And the way that I generally break it down is, I've been taught this, so I stand on the shoulders of many, many great people ahead of me who taught me these things.
Yes,
but,
amen,
many different, a vertical of your goals, and then breaking that out to what do you have to do today? What do you have to do in a week, a month, and then a year? And you list what you have to do for each one of those goals in a day, week, month, year perspective. And what it does is it puts concrete things, concrete goals.
Timing. I like that.
In terms of what
That's
I have
really
to
good.
do.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm going to borrow that. I like that. And I would say something that someone told me, I think it was the career people at Hopkins, if I remember correctly. I hope that's right. And it may have been, I don't know if I don't know if it was Lily Boyer. She's great in my opinion, but the Hopkins team is great. And really good at like helping with the resume building or I don't know. Anyway, but I've done so many different things. It's like in different sectors, and like if I used to have multiple different, and listen, it'd be great to hear your feedback because you could have a totally different take on this. That's okay, right? I've had some people like, you need a specific resume for automotive and a specific resume for venture and a specific, and it was like, I was going to have 5 or some different resumes. And for a while I had like 3 or 4 different resumes, but even just to try to put everything, I'm someone, as you can see, a talk show, very verbose, right? I want to put all the detail in there, and it's like five pages or something like that. Yeah. And in life science, you have these massive CVs, and that's okay. Or if you have academics with all the publication, then that's in certain sectors, then that's what you want. But a lot of times now it's, hey, get it down to 1 page. Hey, get it down to 2 page. And at some point, someone said to me, hey, listen, this resume is not like a perfect historical record. Obviously, be honest and accurate. I'm not saying that, but what it is it is a rough summary to communicate to whomever the audience is what your experience is. If they want more detail, you can go on that. And then it took me I was kind of a little bit resistant to that, but at some point a light went off. I'm like, okay, so for instance, recently I'm talking and some of the automotive people, and I kind of consolidate everything together, and like, oh, this looks like you're applying for a VC position and stuff like that. I'm like, no, I got my automotive in there, and then okay, it's like, and then I've only had a couple folks that have said that, but it's like, what do you need to know? I was one of the top in the country for years, right? I broke all kinds of records. I was a sales manager for Ferrari. I was a sales manager, one of the top Audi stores in the country. I sell cars. I do really, really well at what do you need to know? Do you need to know it doesn't matter. Now and again, it's not about me, but it's a point that this is applicable for everybody, which is understand what it is you need to communicate. Understand that, and you can tell me, you're the expert. What's the average time that a client's going to take to review a resume? 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds? Like, what does that look like? And how long should a resume be?
Yeah. I hate the dialogue and I don't like saying the hate word, but I really don't like how much people talk about get it down to 1 page.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
I mean, to me, I think that there's an element to get it to when it's complete, right? And on the other side, if 62 pages covers your entire career, probably it's not going to be you.
That's a little much. Right? Might be a little much.
I've had stats, and I've made videos online. You could probably find these, cool. Like the other place, like YouTube and stuff.
We're allowed to YouTube right now. We love YouTube.
Yeah. So, I've had CVs that I could grab like this and smash and break the table with. I mean, from clinicians, right?
That's that world, yeah.
On the other side, too short, right? 1 page, 2 pages. It's just, it doesn't. What people are missing is the fact that you put a name and a timestamp, and another name and a timestamp, and the expertise that you did during that time. But what you're basically putting together is a journey. You're putting the foundational stones for me to stand on that one stand or that one position and look at what you did and understand, okay, this is what was going to be the next step. And they took that next step, right? I mean, you're putting a chronological order to your journey. And for you to put your journey out there and not tell anybody where you're going is almost like you just ran into a homeless guy walking down your street. It's like he got to where you were, but now where is he going, right? So the journey, I think, has to have a concept of be complete, past, where you are, and where you're going. And these three things are always what I talk about. I talk about past, present, and future, macro versus micro. I mean, redundant things that are perspectives for me. But to drive the point home, the CV should be complete. The CV is only complete when it tells you the concept of past, present, and future. And at the end of the day, how you construct that is use the words in the dialogue, in the discourse. Make sure that you're aligned to that. People don't like the fact that somebody would come to them and say, hey, can you tailor your CV for this role? And they're like, I put my best foot forward. It took me hours to put together. I don't want to do that. Or, okay, sure, I'll cut a few things out. Or sometimes they'll put a new bullet point at the top so it looks different. But we catch on to that stuff, and at the end of the day, so does the hiring manager. And the hiring manager, the biggest thing is they're not emotionally impacted by your CV.
No.
They're going to look at your CV and it's just information. But what if that information was emotionally impactful? Not in a place where you're like, oh man, I feel so bad for this person, but more or less, what if the CV reflected this idea of journey and that person was like, I want to be a part of that. Like the Justin Biebers of the YouTube, they got the small videos and then I get to see this guy grow into, now he's the biggest world star. Yeah. They want to be a part of that journey, of your journey, as much as you probably want to be a part of their journey. To understand that and communicate it.
Well, yeah, telling the story and making sense of it. And again, not to so and I it's just my habit. I mean, I use anecdotes, because I think that it's something that people can grab onto from my life and stuff. It's like, okay, if you look at my stuff and you say, hey, you can look at it two ways. You can say, hey, this guy doesn't even he wants to do a bunch of other things. He's an entrepreneur. He doesn't want to be in the car business. I don't understand this, blah, blah, blah. Or you can look at it and say, wow, this is someone that's been really successful at pretty much everything he's done and has, one of the top of the country, broken all kinds of records in automotive. And he does all these other things. So, if I'm selling luxury, guess who the car buyers are? Oh, they might be doctors. They might be lawyers. They might be venture capitalists, right? And I've sold all those types of people. And maybe he can kind of figure out this digital thing, and maybe he's a good communicator. Maybe he's good at videos. Maybe he understands how to do less with more and be very entrepreneurial. And in a world where now automotive is completely changing, and venture capital is coming in, and there's different business models, and you're competing against Carvana and Tesla and CarMax and all these different places. Maybe we need someone that can kind of understand that, because we're losing market share to whatever. And there's a way to spin this in a positive. So again, it's how you tell that story, how you package it, how you look at it as a candidate, as a recruiter, as a company. And it goes back to the main principles, which is very, very simple. I think, and then we talked about this, I think that there's been, for the last 30, 50 years, this movement towards hyper specialization and almost siloization, if that's a word, the siloing of skills. Like I'm a super expert in this one little thing, and as soon as, like in computer programming, as soon as there's a new language, you're done. Like it's on to the next. I mean, I was doing this thing in I don't want to. Well, let me rephrase that. I could see where people that were amazing at a certain kind of programming may struggle on the blockchain now because it's a different game. I think now we've moved with work changing and people becoming more entrepreneurial and companies trying to be innovative, even big companies. That lends itself to a lot of cross skills, a lot of generalists, which, oh, by the way, the world was for, hundreds of thousands of years or however long, tens of thousands, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm not an anthropologist or whatever, but, and I think we're getting back to that again, just being able to, it goes back to, do you want to add value? In other words, you have to add value, and whatever company I am, I want the most talented people. And that goes back to the whole principle about venture capital investing. I invested in team first because guess what? The model may change, the name may change, the market may change, the technology may change, but this team will figure it out. I want the most talented people to figure it out. I want the most talented sports team, the most talented researchers, the most talented academics, the most talented business people, the most talented salespeople, the most brilliant minds. They will figure it out. So I think that's what it comes down to, in my opinion.
No, you and my boss have the same methodology. I wouldn't be where I'm at without people in my life that have had that same type of perspective. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we hope to continue to foster and pour over the next generation. It's just, you got to have that open-mindedness. You got to have that ability to just think outside of the constraints of, control and I need this, only this, it has to fit the model, etc. And luckily, like we said, I think we're heading in that right direction, right? For me and for you, I think it's surprising to a lot of people in a world of hyper specialization when you find out, hey, listen, I just built this whole home last year. Or, the cars I drive are because I bought them really, really crappy and I fixed them, right? So, I mean, the reality is when you have an understanding of what you want to do, what you're good at, what you're going to involve yourself in this and in this and in that. And I think that variety is only creates more color to your life. But, again, the majority of people are comfortable. The majority of people want to climb that ladder and know that they're getting their paycheck and, are relatively risk averse. That's the discourse, the world we were brought up in from an academic standpoint. Do your job, memorize these things for the test, and you will get A. I get it. But I think we're on the precipice of, right now, the stuff you and I, John, are saying could be in the ears of some little kid who's sitting in the back seat of his father driving the car. The father could be listening to the podcast and his kid's just getting this, secondhand good advice, if you will, right?
Believe in yourself. You can't paint a masterpiece painting by numbers.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Great statement. Yeah.
Simple as that. Jonathan, you are phenomenal. You've been super gracious with your time. I absolutely want you on the show again. I could talk to you about so many different things, and I appreciate you. I appreciate the comments out there. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, one last question here. On what John's saying, how would you assess abilities looking at the past?
Would you assess abilities looking at the past? I guess at the end of the day, you got to look at this idea of, the success, the variety, right? I mean, how much has somebody done a particular job? How long were you able to do that? What kind of projects? In my world, I'm thinking always science. So if we're talking, ability to sell cars, how many cars have you sold? I mean,
metrics.
What do you know
try to
about
quantify it. Or any accolades or any feedback, or sometimes things are more, some people do the recommendation things, try to get some to quantify, measure, get a statement on it, an endorsement, a recommendation, anything like that. Whatever you can do to crystallize that ability, accomplishment, skill set to the audience out there. And then, as I was telling someone else, we were talking about something else. My buddy that owns a dealership, I'm like, listen, if someone doesn't know you, me, that place, whatever like that, how does it all make sense? And how do you talk about that? So I would say that, anyway, listen, Jonathan, you are absolutely amazing. I know you're on LinkedIn. You're one of my friends on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. It sounds like you're on YouTube as well. Yep. Love to continue this conversation, and really, really appreciate your time.
Well, John, thanks for having me. Next time, let's talk about cars, because I'm definitely into luxury cars.
Down.
I've built, BMWs. I've been around, man.
Oh my gosh.
This is what I've done since I was a kid with my dad. When I was that same age, 14, 15,
Yeah.
he was in a job transition. So let's talk cars. Let's talk, life science anytime, recruitment. I'm here, man. I intend to be here. And, thank you for the platform, the opportunity.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone out there. Have a great night. Thank you so much. I'm John D. Villarreal for Jonathan. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.